The Lord bless you and keep you.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Avon Valley Church's Saturday Conversation. My name is Andrea Board, and I am in Winchester, Virginia, in America. And this morning, I have the complete honor of talking with Sheilah Collis of Rockford. Good morning, Sheilah.
Good morning. It's lovely to see you.
Oh, it's lovely to see you too. I really thank you a lot for agreeing to do this. Gary put my name on the rota for a Saturday Conversation, and I asked him what it is that he wanted me to do. And he said, you've watched enough of these and you know the routine. He said, is there anybody that you would like to sit down with and have a conversation with? I said, Sheilah. So
Well,
I think this is a complete honor to have this time together this morning. So,
well, I think it's an honor to be chosen.
After spending this time this past week getting to know more of you and listening to your stories, it's just amazing the things that you've done in life and the experiences that you've had. And I think we should do this in 2 or 3 parts, because every time you start telling a story, it leads to a great story, and which leads to another great story. So I'm having to edit this down for this will be February 12th when this is aired. So it's going to be quite the challenge to edit this down to the time frame, but we'll try to keep it in a timely fashion. So I just want to ask you, where exactly are you from? Because we've never met in person, and we've never had an actual sit-down conversation. Everything we've had has been over Zoom. So can you tell me a little bit about yourself, where you're from and where you grew up?
Yes, I was born in Eastbourne, which you may not know, but it's on the south coast, further east than Bournemouth.
Okay.
And my parents were relatively young. I mean, my mother was only 19 when she had me, but she was a secular Jew, and my father allegedly, she told me later, was an atheist. And none of that I knew till I was probably in my 20s. And so I grew up in Eastbourne for the first 5 years or 4.5 years. And then with the outbreak of war, everything changed. And my later life, apart from the boarding school bits, which we'll talk about, I think, grew up in Bournemouth, which is not far from here, and Wimborne, which is also not far from here. So I've been a South Coast person in my childhood anyway.
So how did you become interested in medicine?
Well, first of all, I thought I was going to tell you a bit about my education, which leads up to the medicine.
Yeah.
But when the war broke out, children were being evacuated from the south coast because of the fear of invasion. And I went with my school. The whole school went evacuated. I mean, I was at day school, but the whole school moved to Abingdon, and where we shared a school for a year. And then we moved to Maidenhead, where we had our own premises. And that was quite an interesting time, because I was at school there and moved initially to the family at Portsmouth briefly, and then Bournemouth in the school holidays. So a lot of the time, I was away from home. This is during my primary education. And sadly, my father was killed in a bombing raid, returning from a bombing raid over Germany in 1941, when I was about 5.5. So that sort of altered things a bit. And my mother moved to live with my grandmother. And so I went to them in the holidays. And the other thing that was interesting during my primary education was that a bit of bombing happened in Maidenhead, not a lot. But the nuns at the convent school I was at got really worried about my immortal soul, because they must have known I wasn't baptized. You probably have a box to tick on the, application form or something. So they asked my mother to get me baptized. And so I was actually baptized into the Anglican church. The nuns didn't seem to mind that. And so that was quite an event, really, for me. At that stage, I really wanted to be a Catholic, because I'd been pretty brainwashed at the convent. After that, I moved to a boarding school in Bournemouth. My grandmother had hotels and my mother was working in them, and they didn't feel living in a hotel was quite the right environment. So I remained a boarder, but pretty near at hand to the family. And when I was towards the end of my first year at that boarding school, my mother remarried. And my mother, the man she got married to had come over from India. He was a German Jew who'd escaped from Hitler in 1936 and gone to live in India, where he was interned during the war. And then he'd come to Britain to look for a wife. And he found my mother and took her back to India. And of course, from my education point of view, because I was then 11, coming up 12, I remained in England at the boarding school. And how Wimborne came into it was that I had a guardian who looked after me in the holidays, and she lived in Wimborne. So that was where I went. And that school was quite influential, I think, in my decision to do medicine. I'd started off really wanting to be a vet. I passionately wanted to be a vet from the age of 10. Not that I had had many opportunities to own animals being at boarding school, but for some reason I wanted to be a vet. And getting to be a vet was extremely difficult in those days. We didn't have the same organised system for getting into universities that we do now. And there was very much a waiting list for veterinary school. So I would have had to find a job for probably 1 or even 2 years before I went to university, which was a bit daunting, having lived a fairly sheltered life in a boarding school. And also gap years had never been heard of in those days. Everybody went straight to university. When I was about 16, I became a Christian. Up to then, I'd been, first of all, to the Roman Catholic school and then to an Anglican school. So I knew quite a lot about Christianity, but it was when I was 16 that I really committed my life to the Lord. And slowly, people became much more important in my mind to animals. And then on a Christian holiday, I was talking to one of the leaders who'd been through a similar experience, but with a different subject. She'd been very much an academic and research sort of person in physics. And the Lord really spoke to her about people. And she decided that he wanted her to be a teacher. And that's what she was. And so after a bit, I felt very much so that was what God wanted me to do. So I went to medical school and duly qualified.
Wow. So what kind of type of medicine did you practice once you became a physician?
Well, I fairly early on, even as a student, I decided I wanted to do pediatrics, and partly influenced by a particular pediatrician. So often in one's career, I think you're influenced by somebody, you like, impressive, and I love the children. So I qualified in 1960 in pediatrics, and yeah.
Wow. So you spent some time in Vietnam in the 60s.
Yeah,
So
I did.
What I find that interesting because I have an uncle who my father's younger brother who was killed in Vietnam. He was drafted at the age of 19 and into the army, and then after he finished basic training, he was sent to Khartoum, and I think he was there for about 6 months, and he was killed in action, and his body, he was MIA. He was missing in action for about 24 hours. And my grandfather, who was a World War II vet, just hoped and prayed that they would find his body and not have him be a prisoner of war, because they knew he knew that he would just be completely tortured. And they found his body the next day. So I find that part of your story really interesting, because you both were there at the same time, not in the same area, from what I understand. So where exactly were you in Vietnam, and what were you doing?
Yeah, I was in Saigon, the capital of the South, as it was then, and I was working in a big children's hospital. It had 200 beds in this children's hospital, and usually there were about 400 children admitted. So you can work out how many to a bed. And the bigger children were one to a bed. So sometimes there were, several children to a bed. I was, at my interview, interestingly, I was asked that question, how would I react to several children in a bed? Which is a strange question at your interview. I think I replied, well, if they need to be there, and that's what you've got, you have to use it.
You have to use the space that you have. Yeah. So how did you find out about Vietnam? What was the story behind your wanting to go to Vietnam?
Well, I just finished a job and was looking for the next one. And in those days, that there were sort of various paths you could take. And going to Great Ormond Street, Hospital for Sick Children, which is the prestigious hospital in London, was considered a good option, even if you had to move back a grade. So that was one possibility. The other possibility was going to the States to work for a bit. Another possibility was research, and I was not really research-minded. And the other possibility, which looked good on a CV, was a spell in a developing country. So I had some links, because my family were in India, with a Christian hospital in North India. So I wrote them a letter saying, have they got any vacancies, more or less. I also applied for a post at Great Ormond Street, and lo and behold, there was this advertisement in the British Medical Journal where all the posts got advertised. That's where I must have seen the Great Ormond Street one, for this post in South Vietnam. And I thought, well, that sounds interesting. And as it happened, my best medical school friend was a missionary with Overseas Missionary Fellowship in Thailand. And I thought, well, that's great, because I could nip over from Vietnam to Thailand and see what she was up to, you know, and perhaps have holidays with her. So it was just slightly enticing. And so absolutely extraordinary. I got yes from 3 different places. I got yes from India, please come. I got through the interview for the Vietnam job and the interview at Great Ormond Street. So I had never expected choosing from 3, you know, at all. Then a missionary doctor who'd got experience in India and Pakistan, I didn't know him very well, but he slightly warned me off that particular hospital. He thought, I don't know if he thought I wasn't up to it or what, but anyway, so I ditched that one. So then I thought, well, I don't know what to do with the other 2. So I decided to go and talk to the consultant that had interviewed me at Great Ormond Street. And bless him, he said, you can't miss an opportunity like Vietnam. Go, and we'll make sure you have a job when you come back here.
Wow.
So that was, you know, almost unprecedented, I think. So I was able to go knowing I'd have a job to come back to, which was wonderful.
Yeah, you have a little bit of breathing. You can breathe a little bit easier knowing that you don't have to worry about what am I going to do now? I'm back. What am I going to do now?
Yeah, exactly. It was lovely.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was saying, so off I went. Yeah.
So when you were over there, you met somebody who you're still close to. So how did you meet your husband?
Well, I was working in this hospital, and or a small part of the hospital actually, because it was pretty massive, and working mainly with the younger children. The ward I got allocated to was the sort of 0 to 2s, and then a little intensive care unit also for the same age group. I'd gone in the November, and in January 1968, something known as the Tet Offensive happened in Vietnam. I expect you've heard of it. Mm-hmm. The Viet Cong attacked Saigon and actually moved in and took over for about 3 days, I think, before they were turfed out again. But there was fighting, a lot of fighting within the city, and the Viet Cong were there. And I must say the hospital was very much in the thick of it. And after that was all over, there were loads and loads of what nowadays that we call internally displaced people, but they were refugees because of all the fighting. People had left their homes and didn't know where to go and so on. So that these camps were set up. So the team, which that had been about 11 people, the consultant decided we needed to expand it considerably to get adequate people to look after these refugee camps, because the government had decided that they'd ask us to look after the refugee camps. And of course, we were a pediatric team, not experienced in adult medicine, or at least not for some time anyway, and certainly not anything tropical. So they advertised for doctors and nurses to join the team, which suddenly got expanded, and they were aiming really at general practice type doctors who'd be useful in a refugee situation. And that was how I came to meet William, because as it happened, William had just finished a paediatric job, and he'd done quite a lot of paediatrics, and he decided to apply too because he knew it was part of the paediatric team, and he was accepted, and not particularly for the refugee work, but for the hospital work. And so the first I knew about him was that we heard he was arriving, and my housemate, who was the consultant anaesthetist, and I decided we'd better go to the airport to welcome him. He was actually being met by the embassy people who looked after us extraordinarily well, and they were going to take him to his accommodation. So Kathy and I drove out to the airport and found him sitting underneath the roof, which was broken. I mean, fortunately, it wasn't raining, from a shell. And his story is that I took one look at him and went. I mean, I think it wasn't quite as bad as that, but we said, hello and how are you and such and that. And then we did go because the embassy person was coming, and there wasn't much more to do other than just, anyway, so of course I didn't really get to know him for some time. I mean, we worked together. It was very strange when he arrived. Jet lag affected him most extraordinarily badly, and he didn't turn up at the hospital for about 3 days after he arrived. And I get reports from the embassy person that he was okay, but he was sleeping about 23 hours a day, and he'd wake up, have a good meal, and go back to sleep again.
Yeah. So how long?
Wondered who was this chap? We wondered where we were going to see him.
When's he going to get to work? He's sleeping and eating all the time.
Well, exactly.
So how long were the both of you there? Were you there? Did you depart at the same time?
We left at the same time. We were there I was there for 18 months and he was there for a year. I'd gone on a year's contract, but I'd agreed to stay on sort of like a month at a time until they found a replacement for me. So I was very happy to stay, actually, until they did find somebody.
Yeah. Well, I could sit here and talk to you all day about this because I was really fascinated about your experience in Vietnam. But you came back to you came back to England and you worked at Great Ormond Street where the job was waiting for you. Yes.
Well, I didn't go immediately. There was very, very, very conveniently organised at Great Ormond Street. I think at that time they did it every year. A sort of like a course for senior registrars and sort of newly appointed consultants as an update in paediatrics, and I think it was about 6 months. No, not 6 months, 6 weeks. I think I did that, which was very, very useful because, of course, the sort of work we've been doing in Vietnam was totally different to the sort of work that goes on at Great Ormond Street, as you can imagine. Very basic facilities, basic sort of stuff in Vietnam, and quite a lot of different conditions that you don't meet every day in
right.
England.
Yeah.
So yes, I did work at Vietnam, and in Great Ormond Street, and we actually got married when I was about halfway through the job. And
how long have you been in the Rockford area. How long have you been there?
Well, we moved here in 2007, so I think it's 14 years.
Okay.
And that was a retirement move. I mean, I'd retired before we actually moved, but our children were all down in the south of England. So I was, most of my career was in the East Midlands, as was Williams, obviously.
Okay.
We were practicing up there. And so we moved down here to be nearer the children, because the children were so busy with the families that it was difficult for them to get up to our area in the weekends. You know, they've got other things to do.
Yeah.
And we were finding it increasingly difficult to make the long drive down. And so we were thinking ahead, really, that it wasn't going to get any easier.
Yeah.
And there'd been a couple of sort of emergencies, like, can you come now? You know. Sort of.
So at your house in Rockford, I want to hear about the Bible study. You host a Bible study in your house. Is it on a weekly basis?
No, it's twice a month.
Okay.
And when we
that get started?
Well, it was interesting. I mean, because when we bought the house, I remember thinking we have a very nice garden room, which is completely circular. And as we looked around the house, the thought crossed my mind, this room would be perfect for a Bible study. I had no intentions of really thought that it would happen, but you know, the thought crossed my mind. This would be a lovely room for a Bible study. Well, in 2010, the vicar announced his retirement. Well, December 2010, and I was worshipping at Hyde Church then, which in those days was linked with two other parishes, Ellingham and Harbridge. Things have completely changed now. We're with the ABC, but it was different then. And Jeremy came to me. Everyone knows Jeremy from Thought Today. And he said, we need a new place for the Bible study, because it had been at the vicarage. And we thought your house might be quite good because there's plenty of parking and it was pretty central for the three churches. So I discussed it with William and I agreed, little realising that he was expecting me to lead it as well as host it.
He left that detail out.
No, he left that detail out until I came back to him after, you know, the following Sunday and said, William says, go ahead, you know, fine. So that was a bit of a steep learning curve. But we've been going ever since then. Some people have gone and some people have joined. It's, you know, but I think we have a core that have been there the whole time, including Jeremy and Jan, and I've really enjoyed it. It's been a great help to me. I mean, I haven't always led it. I mean, sometimes other people have led it, and we went through a phase when we tried to share it out so that you know, everyone could have a go, even if it sometimes
you would rotate facilities each time.
Yeah, exactly. But lately it's been mainly me, and it's been a wonderful thing, really, because I think in small groups you really do get to know each other and can pray for each other and support each other. We start off with often a hymn, because we've actually got blessed with quite a few choir members in in the group. I can't sing, but at some stage somebody suggested why don't we sing a hymn? So we sometimes sing a hymn. I mean, no keyboard or anything.
Right.
Can't play. We usually are going through a book in the Bible, or sometimes a theme.
Mhm.
Usually we follow whatever Michael Anderson's doing, because before I led this one, I was going, and I'd still go to Michael's group. So it was quite handy. I mean, at one point, Michael, if I was away, Michael would come and lead my group, and I sometimes lead his. So, you know, it was useful. And then we sometimes have a time of prayer at the end, but I'm a most awful timekeeper, because I chat, and we're all good at chatting. You get off on
that's the beauty of having a conversation with you, because you always have something important to say. You always have something that, wow, I really want to listen to what she has to say next. So when you have your Bible study, is there a certain scripture that you kind of lean on more than others during these times?
No, I think we've done we've done Gospels, and we've done letters. We've done Old Testament. I think we try and move around quite a bit.
Okay.
We usually have a break and join in whatever's happening for Lent, the Lent course, and sometimes have a bit of a break in the summer, but otherwise it just keeps going. And when we finish something, we decide what next. Either Michael's group decides, or we suggest something, or whatever. At the moment, sorry.
Is there a particular verse that takes you back to another place that you rely on more than others during any time of your life? I think you and I both have talked about the meeting of Jeremiah.
Yes. When I was in Saigon, I arrived, and believe it or not, my suitcase had got lost, and it didn't turn up for about a week. So I was living out of my hand luggage all that time. And when it did turn up, several useful items like a hairdryer were missing from it. And I was quite upset by all that. And it was all very strange, and the hospital was very strange, and it was extraordinarily hot. And no, actually, it was a cooler bit, I suppose, in November. And I really started to wonder, whether I'd heard correctly from the Lord that I was actually meant to be there. And then it was just routine reading of my Scripture Union notes. I came across this passage in Jeremiah, and Jeremiah 29, verses 11 to 13. Shall I read it to you?
Yes, please.
For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. And from time to time in my life, when, I've had to make decisions or wondered about things, this verse has come back to me on several occasions, really, and has been a great help to me. And interestingly, it's featured quite a lot in other people's thoughts for the day. I've noticed over during COVID.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for your time this morning, Sheilah. I really appreciate it. When I come over, we're going to have a proper chat, have a proper tea and a chat. So who knows when that will be. But yeah, thank you. So this has been a complete honor and a privilege listening to you this morning. And I God bless you for the rest of your day. So
thank you. And I look forward to hearing more of your story and your involvement with the volunteer medical thing you do. Yeah.
We will definitely set aside a day where we can have a chat, have lunch and some tea. So
yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for tuning in this morning for the Saturday conversation. And you all have a blessed week and tune in tomorrow for services. Thank you very much and have a great day.
Lord,